Hello, my name is Emily, and today I'll be presenting my cultural foods project on Burmese food. Burma is a country also known as Myanmar, located in Southeast Asia. It neighbors Thailand, Laos, Bangladesh, China, and India. Today I will be going over a series of recipes featuring meals from each meal of the day. We will be starting out with a recipe very traditional to Burma called Burmese tofu. Burmese tofu originated from the Shan people. It's not exactly tofu in the traditional sense that we would see a Chinese tofu, for example, made out of soybeans. It is actually a tofu made out of besan or chickpea flour. The flour is cooked with water into a thick paste and then left to set. Shan tofu is made yellow in color from turmeric powder. The tofu's texture is jelly-like but firm, and it looks more so like a block of cheese than traditional tofu. If you walk along the streets of Burma, you are bound to see street vendors with giant yellow wheels on their stalls, and that is the Shan tofu. As you can see here, I am at the stage in my cooking process where I am simply cooking the chickpea flour down until it forms its starch and gets nice and thick. Then I will put it in this pan and let it set up on the countertop. There are many ways to enjoy this Burmese tofu, but for me, I tried my hand at making it into a traditional tofu salad. This tofu salad was seriously an explosion of flavors. It has ground peanuts, garlic, shallots, a really interesting ingredient that was quite hard to find for me called kaffir lime, or just lime leaves, coriander, and other very fresh and powerful ingredients. Here you can see me making the dressing and notice all that raw garlic in there. That is really what packed the punch. One thing that I found really interesting about this recipe is it uses half raw Burmese tofu and then half tofu that I actually ended up frying, and that was a trial on its own. This tofu is far more sensitive than soy tofu, and so at first my oil was not hot enough and it was essentially just breaking down this tofu, and as you can see here, you can see it breaking down, but eventually I turned my oil heat up and got it nice and golden. Here you can see me mixing that raw Burmese tofu in with the fried tofu that I just prepared, and then dressing it with that extremely garlicky salad dressing, and finally topping it with all of the yummy goodies, including sliced lime leaves. This is a dish that you can typically find from street vendors along the streets of Myanmar. Next up, I tried my hand at a Burmese curry. This was a very involved dish to make because I had to make my own curry paste from scratch. This is something I definitely had never done before. But this dish is very traditional to the country of Burma. It is typically made with chicken, but since I typically do not eat chicken, I made a vegetarian version featuring tofu instead. This time, traditional Chinese soy tofu. This dish originated in Burma and has since traveled to East India with people who migrated during World War II. At this point in the recipe, I am starting the process of making the broth. This recipe has coconut milk in it, and it tasted very, very similar to a soup that my family has always gotten at a Thai restaurant called Tom Kha. Here you can see me adding in those lime leaves. You can also use curry leaves, and that is the homemade curry paste. It didn't get as creamy and blended as I hoped, but it definitely still worked. And then here is another familiar ingredient for Burma food, which was more chickpea flour, which is what the tofu is made out of. So here I am finishing up my curry and getting ready to serve it. And one common thing I seem to find with Burmese food is that they really love their toppings. So when serving this curry, there are a multitude of things that are traditionally served on it, including fried shallots and onions, sliced raw onions, fried or fresh ginger, fried garlic chips, finely chopped green chilies, lemon wedges, spring onions, crushed chili flakes, fresh herbs, the list goes on and on. I also serve mine with some regular wheat noodles. On to my absolute favorite recipe that I made, this semolina cake. This is a traditional dessert from Burma. It is often served at weddings, birthdays, and feasts, or enjoyed during their Eid celebration at the end of Ramadan. However, you can also find this cake at street food festivals. This cake was unique to me since it used semolina flour, which I am more familiar with in the process of making pasta. So I was really unsure about how this cake was going to come out, but it had the most delicious, sweet flavor, and it just was perfect since it wasn't too sweet. I could seriously sit there and eat way too much of it in one sitting. It had almost the texture of more of like a pudding cake. It was quite moist. Here I am finishing up the cake, regretting my size of pan choice. As you can probably tell, it was a little bit dangerous to be mixing this much liquid in that amount of pan, but similar to the tofu, you cook it down until everything thickens, and then you simply put it into a baking dish, and this one went into the oven for a little bit. Traditional toppings for this cake include white poppy seeds or regular sesame seeds, which is what I opted for. Now on to breakfast last. So I decided to make a vegetarian mohinga. Mohinga is a very traditional breakfast food in Burma. It is more traditionally a fish-based soup with rice noodles that is actually considered by most Burmese people to be the national dish. What's unique about mohinga is that each region, city, and village, and even many restaurants, prepare their mohinga slightly differently. The main reason is that the availability of certain ingredients depends on the region or the local preference. There are so many differences that most cooks have a distinctive feature that indicates their name and origin and informs people of the kind of mohinga that they are serving. I decided to make a vegetarian mohinga, which is typically eaten during the 9 days of the Vegetarian Festival, which is during the 9th lunar month of the Chinese calendar, usually late September or early October. Pretty much every recipe I made while experimenting with Burmese food was very involved and took many steps to prepare. It was quite time consuming and very different than the traditional foods I'm used to eating here in America. Another common theme was the amount of things they fry, bringing us to these onion fritters. Onion fritters are another popular street food and are often seen available all over Myanmar. The onion fritters have a strong flavor from the sweet onions, and the thinly coated batter gives them a light, crispy note. These fritters are very simple to make. After preparing the batter to the right consistency, you simply take a little handful of thinly sliced onions and dip it into hot oil until it's nice and golden brown. Now to finish up the mohinga and top it. Again, many toppings available for mohinga, including the onion fritters, as well as lime wedges, fresh cilantro, rice noodles, and fresh or dried chili flakes. Overall, I really enjoyed getting to know more about Burmese food. As a vegetarian, while making these, I was a little bit limited in which foods I could try, but I still had quite the experience cooking my way through these very exotic dishes for my a bit more conservative American palate.